While all eyes are on the Middle East, a quiet war has opened in our own backyard. U.S. Southern Command has officially launched kinetic strikes inside Ecuador targeting narco-terrorism groups.
We have some news right now. Donald Trump is pledging to use military force in countries across Latin America to target cartels, confirming today that the United States military will be engaging in military actions across Latin America. This comes after overnight the United States military, alongside the Ecuadorian military, conducted strikes in Ecuador against cartels. Today at the Shield of America Summit in Doral, Florida, Donald Trump signed onto a joint security declaration alongside 17 other countries. In there, it's a proclamation that he described as a, quote, commitment to using lethal military force to destroy the sinister cartels and terrorist networks, which means that the strikes we saw in Ecuador may just be the beginning of strikes across Latin America, strikes targeting what the United States says are cartel networks. He said, quote, "We need your help. You just have to tell us where they are." And then the United States will go and start striking across Latin America. That is an expanded military operation. We'll have more updates for you soon. No, Congress didn't approve this. Follow along for more.
For the first time, the U.S. military has carried out a land operation in South America, striking drug cartels in Ecuador. Video from the U.S. Southern Command shows the operation being carried out earlier this week. The U.S. and Ecuadorian military working side by side in what was called, quote, a fight against organized crime. Ecuador's president last month ordering his cabinet to seek out help from allied nations in fighting cartels. NewsNation's Allie Bradley is live with the very latest. So, Allie, what more are we learning about this joint effort?
Yeah, hey, Nicole. So what we know right now is that U.S. Southern Command is saying that American forces have launched an operation alongside Ecuadorian military forces in Ecuador to go after who they're designating as these designated terrorist organizations that have ties to drug trafficking. Now, the military has released very few details about these operations, but officials say this mission is part of a broader campaign against cartel networks operating across the region. Now, earlier this week, Southcom Commander General Francis L. Donovan said, quote, the Ecuadorian people, along with other citizens across the region, have experienced the violence and corrosive consequences of narco-terrorism up close and in their neighborhoods. The time is now for our partners in the Western Hemisphere to take decisive action against this scourge with the assurance that Southcom has their back. Now, Ecuador's President Daniel Noboa, meanwhile, saying that the United States is among several regional allies joining a new phase of Ecuador's war against the drug cartels. And the stakes are high here. President Noboa saying roughly 70% of the world's cocaine moves through Ecuadorian ports, making the country a key transit hub for global drug trafficking. And this all comes as the U.S. also worked with a successful operation alongside the European Union agencies for law enforcement cooperation and Ecuadorian authorities, dismantling a transnational drug trafficking organization linked to the Los Lobos cartel. 16 suspects were arrested, including a high-value target and the seizure of significant quantities of cocaine and cash as well. Now, this all comes as Washington, the Trump administration, continues to push for regional support and more of these countries to kind of step up and join in the fight, Nicole, against narco-terrorism and against these criminal cartels.
So speaking of that fight, Allie, what's happening here at home to combat these cartels?
Yeah, so we just heard from Libby Dean, who was talking about the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, in Florida. And one of the things that he's doing down there is he actually created a coalition, the America's Counter Cartel Coalition, where several countries from the Western Hemisphere are joining together to combat the criminal cartels. They also said that President Trump has invoked the Monroe Doctrine as they work to combat the cartels. Now, this means if Europe tries to interfere with the Americas, the U.S. will see it as a threat. In return, the U.S. wouldn't interfere in European wars or colonies. Now, the Secretary of War hosted the event at U.S. Southern Command headquarters in Florida. The event brought together defense and security leaders from across the Caribbean, the Central America, and South America to strengthen cooperation in the fight against the cartels. Now, the secretary says illegal immigration drives unchecked crime and violence, adding that cartels are a threat to the peace of this hemisphere. Take a listen.
They would recognize it, and they would appreciate it. We are at long last putting America, Americans, and the Americas first, ensuring peace through strength and restoring common sense. At our department, we're doing it by restoring the warrior ethos, rebuilding our military to historic levels, and reestablishing deterrence in this hemisphere and around the world. Across this region, these gangsters control and terrorize large swaths of your territories, kill thousands of your people, and promote chaos that makes normal life sometimes almost impossible. Crime has spiked massively.
Simultaneously, we are tracking a deadly speedboat shootout off the coast of Havana. Cuban prosecutors have charged 6 U.S.-based exiles with terrorism after recovering 13,000 rounds of ammunition.
Begin tonight with the breaking news here, the deadly gun battle involving a U.S. speedboat and Cuban troops off the coast of Cuba. Cuba tonight saying 4 dead in that U.S. boat, 6 wounded. Tonight, Cuba saying the shootout took place in Cuban waters off the southern tip of Florida. Cuba saying 4 people shot and killed, a Cuban commander also wounded in that shootout. Cuba accusing the U.S. registered boat of opening fire as the Cuban border guard vessel approached. Secretary of State Marco Rubio speaking a short time ago on this, and ABC's Martha Raddatz leading us off with late reporting.
Tonight, a deadly gun battle off the coast of Cuba. 4 people killed aboard a Florida-registered speedboat, 6 more wounded. Cuban officials claiming that speedboat violated its territorial waters, approaching within 1 nautical mile of the Alpino Channel north of Corralejo, an area known for its intricate keys and proximity to Florida's southern tip. Cuban border guards in a patrol boat claiming that as they approached to identify who was on board, the crew of the speedboat opened fire, wounding the Cuban commander. Those Cuban troops then returning fire, according to Cuban officials, killing those 4 people on the speedboat before evacuating the wounded for medical treatment. Late today, Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying much is still unknown about the incident, but the U.S. is demanding access and answers.
We obviously want to have access to these people if they are American citizens or U.S. residents. But I'm not going to speculate now.
The New York Times reporting the speedboat was trying to get relatives out of Cuba.
For decades, there's been a very lucrative business using high-speed boats to pull Cuban citizens out of Cuba and get them to Florida. That may be what we're seeing here.
The timing of the bloodshed critical. Cuba is in the middle of an energy crisis amid a U.S. blockade on oil shipments. And U.S.-Cuba relations have been on a knife's edge, following the U.S. seizure of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, Cuba's main energy ally. David, the U.S. Coast Guard is now off the coast of Cuba. Secretary of State Rubio made it clear he does not trust the Cuban account, and the U.S. will do its own investigation. But he also added it is highly unusual to see a shootout in the open seas off Cuba. David?
All right, Martha Raddatz leading us off with the breaking news here tonight. Martha, thank you.
Just after 6 o'clock, and our focus this morning is on that investigation continuing into the deadly shootout at sea, where the Cuban government has released the identities of the 10 men who were on board a boat that came from the U.S., who they say opened fire on their troops during the shootout out at sea.
Yeah, the Cuban government says that the group entered Cuban territorial waters on a boat registered right here in Florida. The boat's operator reported to police that his boat was stolen, but after that shootout. Now, here's what we know so far. The deadly confrontation happened Wednesday near the northeastern coast of Cuba. Cuban officials say its military killed 4 and captured 6 others who were injured after they entered into the waters there. The Cuban government also says the men were armed and initiated the fight. Meantime, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. will be carrying out its own investigation. U.S. officials also telling NBC News that they have requested official access to the injured men that were captured by Cuba.
We're also learning the identities of the men who were killed and the ones captured. The 4 men on your screen are the men who were killed, and we've been able to confirm 3 of their images, their photos. We know at least one of them was a U.S. citizen. Here are the names and the photos of 6 people who were detained, including those photos of the ones we've been able to confirm. Our crews have been working around the clock to get in contact with their relatives who live throughout the state of Florida. We are also learning more about the investigation into the stolen boat, which is at the center of this investigation.
Yeah, NBC 6's Julia Bagg joins us live all the way down south in Homestead. And Julia, we know deputies were at the home of the suspect accused of stealing that boat.
That's right. I mean, investigators have been everywhere from Big Pine Key and then here in Homestead just overnight, zeroing on this home behind me.
The Cuban government offering its latest update with the reading of a prepared statement. We now know the names of those who were killed during the shootout Wednesday off Cuba's coast. Hector Cruz Correa is among the dead. He's suspected of stealing a boat from Big Pine Key and heading to Cuba. Homeland Security agents gathered evidence focusing on this white Chevy pickup truck, taking neighbors by surprise.
We started to see a cop and then cars, and I said, what's going on?
Case documents from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office show Angel Montera called deputies to report his boat had been stolen from this dock on Avenue G. Montera said he later learned his boat was found off Cuba's coast after a deadly shootout with that country's Coast Guard. Montera told deputies he believed Cruz Correa stole his boat. He said Cruz does tile work for him. The report notes this white Chevy pickup truck belongs to Cruz, and it's the same truck a neighbor spotted Tuesday night. That neighbor said she saw a man get out of the truck and get on the boat. The report goes on to say that Cruz has family in Cuba, including 2 daughters. Montera reported that Cruz was trying to fix a large boat with twin motors and that he even borrowed a trailer from him to hold another large vessel. But Montera told deputies he did not know why Cruz was trying to repair those boats.
No. Sí.
NBC6 was there when a Miami-Dade deputy arrived at Cruz's wife's home. She told us she had reported him missing.
Now, we also spoke with Cruz's ex-wife, and she is the mother of his 5-year-old son. She told us she was in shock about what happened, and she did not know how she was going to break the news to her son about his father. Live this morning in Homestead, Julia Bagg, NBC6 News.
Julia, thank you. And as we mentioned, our crews have been working hard to try to get in contact with the relatives of those men who were killed and detained, most of whom live in the state of Florida. We spoke with a woman whose husband is on the list of detainees that Cuba released. She says she was shocked when she heard the news because she thought her husband went to work in another state.
I feel so sad, angry, worried about him.
We also talked with the wife and daughter of another man, Galindo Sariol, another one of the detainees. He is a former political prisoner who has spent time supporting struggles of Cubans on the island. His wife told us in Spanish she has no idea that this plan was happening. She told us that he was going to work, and now, of course, they are fearful. They're worried about their loved ones. And coming up in our next half hour, we're going to hear from more of the families connected to these 10 men.
The Cuban government called this a, quote, foiled armed infiltration. It's no secret that there are several anti-Cuban government groups in South Florida, and several of these groups claim some of their members were involved in that deadly shooting. NBC6, we spoke to one member of Brigade 2506, the Cuban exile military squad involved in the failed Bay of Pigs invasion to overthrow Fidel Castro. That was back in 1961. He tells NBC6 that he feels like negotiation is the only way to establish a democracy there.
We all want a free Cuba, and although we have different ways of achieving that, it's all peaceful right now. We want to convince the Cuban government that it's time to give up.
Meantime, 4 regime change groups posted a message on social media urging Cubans on the island to take action.
The Western Hemisphere is destabilizing. You need a global freedom mindset. Subscribe to Gettoit Media for the tactical updates the mainstream won't touch.